Hello, and welcome to the Unsleeping Historian. Tonight, there is no need to do anything. No need to focus too intently. Simply find a comfortable position, allow the weight of your body to settle, and let the sounds of the present day recede. We are about to travel back in time, not to the clash of swords or the grandeur of royal courts, but to a quieter, more fundamental world. A world of earth and toil, and the slow, turning wheel of the seasons. Tonight, we journey to the Viking Age, but we will not be boarding a longship bound for distant shores. Not yet. Our story begins in the heartland of Scandinavia. On a small, isolated farmstead, we are going to explore the lives of the vast majority of Norse people, the farmers. Theirs was a life not of legend, but of labor, a life of quiet resilience, of profound connection to the land, and of constant gnawing uncertainty. Before the sagas could be written, before the great voyages could be launched, the land had to be worked. So let us go there now. Let us feel the cold morning air, smell the wood smoke on the wind, and understand the world that lay beneath the feet of the Vikings. Let your mind drift, and let us begin. Imagine yourself here. It is not a specific year we can name. Perhaps sometime in the 9th or 10th century. The concept of a numbered year would mean very little to you anyway. Your time is measured by the sun, the moon, and the seasons. The first sensation is the cold. It is a deep, penetrating cold that seeps up from the ground and clings to the damp air. You are inside the longhouse. But the distinction between inside and out is a subtle one. You are lying on a raised wooden platform that runs along the wall, covered in animal hides and scratchy woolen blanket. The air you breathe is thick, a complex mixture of scents. There is the foundational smell of damp earth, the ever-present aroma of wood smoke from the central hearth, the musky scent of sleeping animals at the far end of the hall, and the faint, sour smell of unwashed bodies and old wool. Slowly, the world begins to stir, not with an alarm, but with a gradual, organic awakening. You hear the low grunt of a pig, the rustle of straw as one of your family members turns in their sleep. A baby might fuss for a moment before being quieted. This is your home, a single, long room that you share with your entire extended family, parents, grandparents, siblings, children, and, during the harshest months of winter, your most valuable livestock. There is no privacy here. Every cough, every sigh, every whispered word is a communal experience. Your eyes are open now, but there is little to see. The only light trickles in from the smoke hole in the roof, a hazy, gray column that illuminates the dancing dust motes and the thick, smoky air. The fire in the long hearth, a pit running down the center of the hall, has been banked for the night and is little more than a bed of glowing embers. Your first task is to move. Every muscle in your body aches with a familiar, chronic stiffness. The cold has settled deep into your joints. You swing your legs over the platform, your bare feet meeting the cold, hard-packed earth of the floor. You reach for your tunic, a simple garment, of course, undyed wool. The fabric is oily to the touch from the natural lanolin, which offers some protection from the damp, but it is also perpetually scratchy against your skin. Your breakfast is a simple, grim affair. It is a porridge, a grit, made from barley or oats, boiled with water from a nearby stream. It is served in a rough-hewn wooden bowl. If the previous year's harvest was kind, perhaps a handful of dried berries or a spoonful of honey might be stirred in for flavor. But often, it is just the plain, bland taste of cooked grain. It is not meant for pleasure. It is fuel. It is what will give you the strength to face the day's labor. On the worst days, in the lean months, at the tail end of a long winter, there is no grain. On those days, breakfast might be something else, something born of desperation. Imagine chewing on boiled leather to soften it enough to swallow. Or worse, imagine the meal that haunted the folklore of the Norse people. Bark soup, the inner bark of the elm or pine tree, stripped away, dried, and ground into a coarse flour, then boiled in water. It offered scant nutrition, a gritty, resinous gruel that scoured the throat and filled the belly without truly sated the hunger. To eat bark soup was to know that you were at the very edge of survival. The scene slowly transitions to an exterior shot. The sun is now just beginning to rise, casting a weak, watery light over the landscape. A man is seen trying to guide a simple wooden plow, an ard, through a rocky field. Narrator. As the sun casts its first anemic rays across the fjord, the workday begins. If it is spring, the season of hope and immense effort, the primary task is plowing. Forget the image of a heavy, iron plow turning neat furrows of rich soil. Your plow is enough. It is a simple tool, often made entirely of wood, perhaps with its tip fire-hardened or, if you are fortunate, sheathed in a small piece of precious iron. It does not turn the soil over. It only scratches a shallow groove into the earth. Two thin, bony oxen are yoked to the yard. They strain, their breath pluming in the cold air. But often, a family is not wealthy enough for 2 oxen. Perhaps you have one, and your eldest son pulls alongside it. Or perhaps there are no beasts of burden at all, and it is you, your wife, and your children who must become the engine, leaning your full weight into the frame, fighting the earth for every single inch. The work is agonizingly slow. The soil here is thin and rocky. The yard catches constantly on stones and roots, jarring your entire body, sending shocks of pain up your arms and into your shoulders. Your hands, raw and calloused, grip the smooth, worn wood of the plow handles. You shout encouragement and curses at the oxen, your voice hoarse in the vast, quiet landscape. Behind you, your wife or one of your older children follows, breaking up the larger clods of earth with a wooden mallet or a simple hoe, and dropping the precious seeds barley, rye, oat, shinto, the shallow furrow. Every seed is a prayer to Freya, and Freya, the gods of fertility, for a gentle season. You watch the sky with constant anxiety. A late frost, a common occurrence in these northern lands, could wipe out the budding seedlings entirely, erasing weeks of back-breaking labor and condemning your family to another hungry winter. Too much, and they will rot in the field. You are not a master of the land. You are its servant, and a nervous one at that. The visual shifts to show the changing seasons. Quick, gentle, fades between a field in green summer. The Summa is a brief, frantic race against time. The sun hangs in the sky for long, nearly endless hours, but you know this period of light and warmth is fleeting. The work is relentless. The fields must be weeded by hand, a task that forces you to your knees for hours on end. Fences, simple constructions of wood or stone, must be constantly mended to protect your meager crops from deer and other wild animals. Your small vegetable patch, the needs constant tending. Here you grow cabbages, beans, and peas, vital supplements to your grain-heavy diet. Life is not confined to the plowed fields. You must also think of your livestock. Your sheep, a hardy, small breed, need to be moved to higher pastures. Their wool is your clothing, your blankets, your currency. The cattle, small and tough, provide the milk that can be turned into cheese and butter, precious sources of fat and protein. The pigs, left to forage for themselves in the surrounding woods, must be tracked and protected from predators. And then there is the world beyond your farm. The fjord teems with fish-cod herring. You take your small, simple boat, a fairing, and spend hours on the cold, grey water, pulling up lines and nets. The forests offer their own bounty. You forage for berries, mushrooms, and nuts, knowledge passed down through generations. Every edible thing is a small victory against the ever-present threat of hunger. The rhythm of your life is dictated by these tasks, a ceaseless cycle of work that begins before the sun is fully risen and ends long after it is set. Then comes the host autumn, the season of reward and judgment. The harvest is the single most important event of the year. The grain must be cut, and it is done with a short-handled iron sickle. You spend your days bent over, grasping stalks of barley in one hand and slicing with the other. The repetitive motion sends a searing pain through your lower back. Your whole family is in the field. Even the young children have a role, gathering the cut stalks into sheaves. You work with a desperate urgency, always watching the northern sky. The first snows of winter can arrive with shocking speed. An early blizzard could bury your harvest, your entire year's work, your hope for survival, under a blanket of white. Once the grain is cut, the work is far from over. It must be threshed, winnowed, and then, most importantly, preserved. You do not have airtight containers or refrigeration. You rely on ancient techniques. Grain is stored in pits dug into the earth or in specially built storehouses, always at risk from damp and vermin. Fish and meat are salted, smoked, or dried, filling the autumn air with their pungent, savory scent. The slaughter of livestock is a grim but necessary ritual. You cannot afford to feed all your animals through the winter. Several will be chosen to be killed. Let us pause on this moment. It is not a scene of gratuitous violence. It is a solemn, practical act. Life is being taken so that your family may live. Every single part of the animal will be used. The meat for food, The hide for leather, the bones for tools and needles, the intestines for sausage casings. Even the blood is collected and used to make a type of pudding. Waste is a concept you cannot afford. This act, more than any other, represents the stark reality of your existence. A constant, unblinking negotiation between life and death. The scene changes to a dark, snowy landscape. The longhouse is now almost entirely buried in snow, with only the roof and a path to the door visible. The wind howls softly. Narrator, and then, winter arrives, the Veta. The world outside shrinks, buried under a deep layer of snow. The sun becomes a weak, distant memory, appearing for only a few hours a day as a pale smudge on the horizon. The cold is now a relentless enemy. The wind shrieks around the corners of the longhouse, testing every chink in the turf walls. Your world becomes the single, smoky room of your home. The livestock are now inside with you, their warmth a welcome addition, but their smell now a permanent part of the atmosphere. The days are filled with indoor chores. The women of the family spend countless hours at the warp-weighted loom, a tall, vertical frame where they weave the wool that was spun throughout the year into cloth. The rhythmic thump-thump of the loom weights is the heartbeat of the longhouse in winter. You, the farmer, are now a craftsman. You repair your tools, sharpening the precious iron sickle, carving a new handle for an axe, mending a fishing net. You carve wooden bowls, spoons, and small toys for the children. There is no idle time, but the primary activity of winter is waiting and worrying. Your family's survival depends entirely on the food you manage to harvest and preserve in the autumn. Every meal is a careful calculation. How much dried fish can be eaten today? How much grain can be spared for the porridge? You watch your stores dwindle, counting the weeks until the spring. Thaw might, just might, come. This is when the true fear creeps in. The gnawing anxiety of starvation. You feel your own body weakening. The hunger a dull, constant ache in your belly. You see the pinched faces of your children. The sagas of the Viking Age are filled with heroes and glorious battles, but they are also haunted by tales of famine, of communities wiped out by a single failed harvest. This is the time for stories. Around the flickering light of the central hearth, the elders would speak. They would tell the old tales, the myths of Odin and Thor, the histories of your ancestors. These stories were more than entertainment. They were a lifeline. They were a way to pass the crushing darkness, to reinforce the bonds of kinship, to remember that your family had survived countless winters before, and to nurture the hope that you would survive this one too. Imagine yourself there, a child huddled in the smoky darkness, listening to a grandparent's voice rise and fall with the cadence of an ancient poem. The world outside is a frozen, lifeless wasteland, but in here, in the dim light of the fire, surrounded by the smells of smoke and wool and sleeping beasts, the stories keep the darkness at bay. The life of a Viking farmer was a life of profound hardship. It was a life of aching muscles, of calloused hands, of a constant, low-level hunger. It was a life lived on the very edge of subsistence, where one stroke of bad luck, a late frost, a sick cow, a crack in a grain storage pit could mean the difference between life and death. Their world was not one of glory or adventure. It was a small, circumscribed world of mud and sweat and stone. And yet, it was from this foundation of relentless, uncelebrated toil that the entire Viking Age was built. It was the surplus from 1,000 such farms that fed the crews of the longships. And it was the quiet resilience learned over 100 winters that gave them the strength to face the unknown. Their lives were a constant struggle, but in that struggle, there was a deep and undeniable dignity. The dignity of the life of the farmer was the bedrock of the Norse world, a life of cyclical toil, governed by the turning of the seasons and the needs of the soil. For most, this was the entirety of their existence, but the very harshness of that life could sometimes kindle a different kind of fire. For some, the answer to a poor harvest or a crowded valley was not to work the old land harder, but to seek new land altogether. This impulse had already pushed the Norse people across the grey expanse of the North Atlantic. From the rugged shores of Norway, they had settled the volcanic island of Iceland, and from Iceland, a man named Eric the Red, an exile and an explorer, had led a fleet to settle the even more remote and challenging shores of Greenland. But the horizon never truly ends. It only recedes. Our story now shifts from the solid, unforgiving earth of the farm to the shifting, uncertain surface of the sea. We join a man born into this world of frontiers and exploration. His name is Leif, son of Eric, We will join him on the deck of his ship as he prepares to sail not into the known world, but into the vast, silent mystery of the West, into the ocean that no one had ever intentionally crossed. Imagine yourself now, standing on the deck of a ship. It is not the sleek, intimidating longship of saga and legend. This is a Nair. It is a merchant ship, a cargo owler. It is wider, deeper, and more robust. It is a vessel designed not for speed and warfare, but for endurance. Feel the deck beneath your feet. The wood is rough, damp with sea spray and morning dew, and sealed with tar that gives off a faint, sharp scent in the cool air. The entire ship is built of overlapping planks of oak and pine, clenched together with iron rivets. It is a work of profound craftsmanship, but it is also a living thing. With every gentle swell of the water, the ship breathes. A chorus of low groans and creeps emanates from its timbers. This is the voice of the ship, a sound that will be your constant companion for weeks to come. You are at anchor in a fjord in the eastern settlement of Greenland, at Leif Erikson's own family's stead. The year is somewhere around 1000 AD. Looking at the shore, you see no grand forests. The landscape is a stark tapestry of green pastures, grey rock, and the immense, blue-white wall of the ice cap in the distance. The very wood your ship is made from is a precious import, likely from Norway. It is this scarcity, this constant need for resources, that fuels the journey you are about to take. Leif Erikson, the captain of this expedition, is not a fantastical hero. He is a practical man, a chieftain, and a skilled sailor. He moves about the deck with a quiet confidence, overseeing the final preparations. His crew, about 35 men in all, are much like him. They are farmers, traders, and sailors. They are loading the last of the provisions, heavy barrels of fresh water, casks of soured milk, and bundles of dried fish and salted mutton are being lowered into the open hold in the center of the ship. There is no fanfare, no cheering crowds, just the quiet, methodical work of men who know the sea and the risks it holds. The anchor is raised. With long oars used to maneuver in the harbor, the Nair is slowly turned towards the mouth of the fjord. Then, the great single sail is unfurled. It is a massive square of heavy, lanolin-rich wool, perhaps striped in red and white. It catches the wind with a heavy thwump, and the ship comes alive. The creaking of the timbers deepens into a steady rhythm. The ship begins to move, leaving the familiar world of Greenland behind. Before you now is only the open ocean, a vast, gray, and empty expanse. The days on the open ocean begin to blur into one another, each defined by the same simple, vital routines. There are no cabins, no quarters below deck. Everyone lives and sleeps in the open hold, huddled amongst the cargo. At night, you wrap yourself in a woolen cloak and a sheepskin hide, trying to find a place out of the wind. The cold is a constant companion, and you are never truly dry. The sea spray seems to find its way into everything. Time is kept by the sun. When it's visible, you can judge the time of day and hold your course. At night, the stars become your map. You know the constellations. The star that sits above the pole. Navigation is an intimate art form. A conversation with the sky. Leif or another experienced sailor might use a simple wooden disc, a sun shadow board, to track the sun's height at midday, helping to gauge their latitude. Perhaps they even have a sunstone, a piece of calcite crystal that, according to the sagas, could reveal the sun's position even through a veil of cloud. But mostly, they rely on instinct, on experience. They read the color of the water, the pattern of the swells, the direction of the wind. They watch for the flight of birds, knowing that certain species only venture so far from land. It is a form of navigation that requires you to be utterly present, to notice everything. A small, stone-lined box in the middle of the ship serves as the fire pit. In calm weather, a fire is carefully kindled to cook a warm meal, likely a stew of dried meat and whatever fish can be caught from the side of the ship. But when the weather turns, you eat cold, hard bread and dried fish, chewing slowly to make it last. The rhythm of the days is slow, hypnotic. The endless slap and hiss of the waves against the hull, the groan of the mast, the flapping of the sail when the wind shifts. For hours, there is nothing to see but water and sky. The world has been reduced to this single, creaking vessel. And then, there are the dangers. They do not always arrive with a roar. Sometimes, the danger is silence. A thick fog can descend without warning, enveloping the ship in a blind, white world. The sun vanishes. The horizon disappears. The world shrinks to a few yards of gray water. All you can hear is the dripping of condensation from the rigging. In this moment, the greatest fear is not of a monster, but of being utterly and completely lost, drifting in an unknown direction. With your precious supply of fresh water diminishing with every passing day, the crew would be quiet during these times, speaking in low voices, their eyes straining to pierce the impenetrable mist. Then there are the storms. The sky to the west darkens to a bruised purple. The wind begins to moan in the rigging, a low hum that grows into a shriek. The sea, once placid, awakens. The air begins to climb and then slide down huge, rolling mountains of dark water. Waves crash over the bow, sending sheets of freezing spray across the deck. There is no panic. There is only exhausting, methodical work. The great sail is reefed, or lowered entirely, to prevent the mast from snapping. The men work together, their movements sure and practiced, their faces grim and soaked with spray. 2 or 3 men must now fight the great steering, or at the stern of the ship, trying to keep the vessel's head pointed into the waves. The ship groans and shudders with every impact, its timbers tested to their absolute limit. In these moments, you are completely at the mercy of the ocean. The world is nothing but the deafening roar of the wind, the crash of water, and the straining wood of your small ship. You do not pray for victory. You simply pray for the storm to pass. And after hours, or perhaps days, it does. The wind abates. The crew, bruised and utterly exhausted, raises the sail once more. They check the cargo, repair any damage to the rigging, and find their course again from the returning sun. And the voyage continues. After many weeks at sea, a cry comes from the lookout. Land. It is a low, dark shape on the horizon. As they draw closer, a sense of disappointment settles over the crew. The land is a vast, barren expanse of flat, gray stones and distant gleaming glaciers. There are no trees, no green pastures. It is a sterile, forbidding place. Leif names it Heliland, the land of flat stones. They do not linger. It has nothing to offer them. They turn the Nares south and sail on. 2 more days of sailing, and they sight land again. This time, the feeling is different. This land is flat and low, but it is covered, as far as the eye can see, with forests. Dark, dense, green forest. 2 men from the treeless plains of Greenland. This is a site of almost unbelievable wealth. Wood for building, for heating, for ship repair. Leif names it Markaland, a land of forests. They may have landed briefly, felt the solid earth under their feet, smelled the rich scent of pine and damp soil. They cut down a few trees to prove their discovery, a tangible treasure, and then they sail on. The wind is from the northeast now, pushing them onward, further south. They sail for 2 more days before they sight land again, and this time, they know they have found something truly special. They find an island to the north of the main landmass, and then sail into a channel between the island and a cape that juts out from it. The air here is different. It is milder. As they guide the ship into a shallow bay and finally run it aground on a beach, they step out into a world of gentle abundance. The dew on the grass in the morning seems sweeter. They see meadows of lush grass, a sight that would make a Greenland farmer weep. And the rivers. The rivers are teeming with salmon, larger than any salmon they have ever seen in Greenland or Norway. They decide to stay, to build a camp and explore this new world. They drag the Nair further ashore and build simple shelters. Buoy, booths, from the plentiful wood. For the first time in months, they are on solid ground. For the first time in their lives, they are in a land that seems to want for nothing. As they explore, they find even more wonders. One day, a man from the crew, a German named Turker, goes missing. When they find him, he is in a state of high excitement. He speaks of finding something from his homeland. He has found vines and grapes, wild grapes, growing in tangled abundance. For men who drank ale and mead, the idea of wine was a symbol of richness, of a southern, almost magical world. Leif named the country Vinland, the land of wine. They spend the entire winter there, at their small settlement of Ear. And what a winter it is. It is a stark contrast to the oppressive darkness and cold of Greenland. There is so little frost that the few cattle they might have brought with them can graze outside for much of the season. They spend their days felling trees, gathering grapes, fishing in the bountiful rivers, and exploring. It is a life of ease and plenty that must have felt like a dream. As spring arrives, warm and gentle, they prepare for the journey home. They load the Nar with a cargo more precious than any silver, timber, great logs of maple and other hardwoods. They also load dried grapes, a testament to their discovery. The voyage back to Greenland would be long, but it would be a journey of triumph. Leif Erikson and his crew were not conquerors. They were explorers. Yes, but they were driven by the same fundamental needs as the farmer in his field. The search for resources, for security, for a better life. The creaking of their ship was the sound of a possibility being born. They had crossed the abyss, and on the other side, they had not found monsters or the edge of the world, but a land of unimaginable promise. As they sail away, leaving that gentle shore behind, the new world once again becomes a line on the horizon, then nothing at all. The great gray ocean embraces them once more. The long journey home begins, their minds full of the memory of a place where life was not a constant struggle, but a gift, freely given by the land itself. The voyage of Leif Erikson was a journey into the future, a glimpse of a new world. But the Viking Age was as much about the past as it was about the future. Their society was steeped in reverence for ancestors, for the stories and the legacies of those who came before. A life was a fleeting thing, but a reputation, a story, could last for generations. And the most powerful statements were not always spoken or written, but built of stone, of earth, and of timber. We now leave the open ocean and travel back to the heart of the old world, to Norway. We are going to a place where a story was not just told, but buried. A place where archaeology and legend intertwine. We journey to the year 1900, when a farmer's field gave up a secret that had been held in the dark, damp earth for over 1,000 years. We are going to explore one of the most magnificent and haunting discoveries in all of Viking history, the Oseberg ship burial. Imagine yourself as a farmer, Knut Rom. In the year 1903, your farm lies near the town of Tonsberg, on the western side of the Ost. For generations, your family has worked this land. You know every contour of the fields, every rise and fall of the earth. There is one particular mound on your property, a large, long hillock that the locals called Revihogen, the Fox Hill. It's just another part of the landscape, a place where children play and foxes dig their dens. But you begin to notice things. The mound is unusually symmetrical, and as you dig into it to create a new drainage ditch, your shovel strikes hard, preserved wood deep beneath the turf. You are not the first to find something here. Local legend whispers that treasure hunters tried to dig into the mound centuries ago, but were driven away by strange lights and unsettling sounds. Curiosity gets the better of you. You contact Gabriel Gustafsson, an archaeologist at the University of Oslo. In the summer of 1904, Gustafsson and his team arrive. What they begin to uncover is beyond anyone's wildest expectations. This is not just a hill. It is a burial mound, and at its heart is not a simple grave, but an entire ship. What they found was a vessel of breathtaking beauty. It was a longship, but not a warship, like the Nair was a cargo ship. This was something else entirely. It was a carvy, a type of vessel that could be used for both coastal travel and on longer voyages. But this one was old, even when it was buried. It was built around the year 8. Look at its construction. It is made almost entirely of oak. It is 71 feet long, a slender, elegant shape. Its prow and stern rise high into the air, culminating in magnificent, intricate carvings. The prow is a coiling serpent, its head spiraling in on itself in a hypnotic, graceful curve. The stern post is its tail, unfurling in a similar, beautiful arc. The entire length of the ship's hull is covered in complex, interwoven animal carvings gripping beasts, their bodies twisting and contorting, their limbs and jaws entwined in a dense, flowing tapestry of wood. This was not a simple tool for transportation. This was a masterpiece, a floating work of art. The excavation is a slow, painstaking process. The mound, made of heavy blue clay and sealed with turf, created an almost anaerobic environment. The lack of oxygen preserved the wood and countless other organic materials to a miraculous degree. As the archaeologists carefully removed the layers of clay and stone that were piled on top of the ship, they realized they are not just excavating a vessel. They are opening a time capsule, a funeral chamber, arranged with deliberate, ritualistic care. The ship was the coffin. A grave chamber had been built just behind the mast. Inside, the floor was covered with a bed of soft down and pillows, a final resting place. And here, the archaeologists made their most important discovery: the remains of two women. Who were they? The question hangs in the air, even today. For decades, it was believed that one was a queen, or a high priestess, and the other, her servant, sacrificed to accompany her into the afterlife. But modern science has deepened the mystery. One woman was elderly, between 70 and 80 years old. Her skeleton shows signs of advanced age and serious illness. She suffered from a form of cancer, which must have caused her immense pain. She was a woman of high status, her diet rich in meats, a luxury in the Viking age. The other woman was younger, around 50 years old. Her collarbone was broken and had healed poorly, which would have been a painful, lifelong injury. For a long time, she was thought to be the servant, but her DNA tells a different story. Her mitochondrial haplogroup, U7, suggests that her maternal ancestors came from the Black Sea region, possibly Iran, a high-status woman with foreign ancestry. This complicates the picture immensely. Was she a foreign princess, married into the Norwegian dynasty? Was she a revered seer, a vulva? We do not know. The ship holds their bodies, but it guards the secret of their identities. The treasures buried with them tell a story of immense wealth and power. Imagine the scene as the archaeologists uncover these items, one by one, from the dark clay. 4 intricately carved wooden sledges, their posts shaped like animal heads with snarling teeth. A wagon, the only complete Viking Age wagon ever found. Its every surface covered in mythological carvings. 3 ornate beds, chests filled with tools for weaving and textile worklooms, spindles, thread windows indicating that the production of fine cloth was a high-status activity. There were kitchen implements, pots, pans, knives, and a cauldron still containing the remnants of a beef and mutton stew, prepared for the final journey. They found buckets, one of which, the Buddha bucket, is decorated with enamel figures that seem to have no connection to Norse mythology at all. Another hint of Far Eastern trade and cultural contact. They found remnants of tapestries, intricate weavings, showing processions of warriors, gods, and mythological beasts. They found seeds of wheat, a crop that could not be grown in that part of Norway, another luxury import. And they found the bones of 15 horses, 4 dogs, and 2 oxen, all sacrificed and laid to rest outside the burial chamber, ready to serve their mistresses in the next world. This was not just a burial. It was a statement, an act of conspicuous consumption so profound it is difficult for us to grasp. To take a ship this beautiful, this valuable, and remove it from the world of the living, to fill it with priceless treasures and then bury it forever, was an act of supreme power. It was a message to the community, to rival chieftains, and to the gods themselves. It declared that the family who staged this funeral was so wealthy, so powerful, that they could afford to discard a fortune. But it was also an act of love, and perhaps of fear, a way to honor the dead, to ensure their comfort in the afterlife, and to make certain that their powerful spirits would remain at peace and not haunt the living. The ritual itself must have been an incredible spectacle. Imagine the ship being dragged over land from the fjord to the burial site, a feat of engineering requiring hundreds of people. Imagine the procession, the chanting, the solemn slaughter of the animals, the placement of every single object with care, and then the final, monumental task of building the mound, piling tons of stone and clay and turf over the ship, until it disappeared completely from view, becoming just another hill in the landscape, a sleeping secret. Let us return to the 2 women. The elderly woman, suffering and in pain. The younger woman, with her foreign ancestry and her poorly healed wound. What was their relationship? Were they a queen and her trusted advisor? Sisters? A mother and daughter? Were they lovers? The skeletons cannot tell us. The sagas, written centuries later, offer no clear answers. The mystery of Oseberg is not just who they were, but what they represented. The burial is a testament to the fact that power in the Viking Age was not exclusively a male domain. Women could be chieftains, priestesses, landowners, and keepers of a family's honor and legacy. The incredible collection of textile tools, the finest ever found from this period, suggests that the women's work of weaving was not just a domestic chore, but a source of economic and cultural power. The ship, the sledges, the wagon, these are all modes of transport. They speak of a journey into the grave, but also a journey into the other world. In Norse belief, the afterlife was a complex concept, not just Valhalla for the warriors, but other realms, like Helgafell, the holy mountain, a peaceful place where families were reunited, or the field of the goddess Freya. This lavish burial was intended to equip the 2 women for that journey, and to ensure they arrived in the style to which they were accustomed. Today, the Oseberg ship rests in a climate-controlled museum in Oslo. It has been painstakingly reassembled, a dark, ghostly presence in the quiet hall. To stand before it is to feel the weight of centuries. The wood, dark and rich, still seems to hold the memory of the forest where it grew, the hands that shaped it, and the fjord where it once sailed. You can trace the lines of the animal carvings, feeling the rhythm and the energy that the artist chiseled into the oak over 1,000 years ago. It is a monument to beauty, power, and death. But most of all, it is a monument to mystery, a puzzle with missing pieces. We can analyze the wood, sequence the DNA, and catalog the artifacts, but we can never truly know the minds of the people who built it. We can never hear the stories the two women told, or understand the exact nature of the bond between them. The ship is a silent storyteller. It speaks of a world where art and function were one and the same, where the sacred and the profane were deeply intertwined, and where death was not an end, but a transition, a final, magnificent journey. It reminds us that for every story that was written down in a saga, 1,000 others were buried in the earth, waiting in the quiet, patient darkness. We have stood on the damp earth of a Norwegian farm, feeling the bite of the winter wind. We have tasted the salt spray on the deck of a ship sailing into an unknown sea. We have descended into the quiet, sacred darkness of a queen's tomb. We have touched the tangible remnants of Viking life, the simple wooden plow, the sturdy timbers of an heir, the intricate carvings on a burial ship. But there is another layer to this world, a layer that exists not in the soil or on the sea, but in the mind. It is the story the Vikings told themselves about themselves, a highly edited, carefully curated, and beautifully embellished fantasy of what it meant to be noble, powerful, and heroic. We now leave the world of archaeology and enter the world of ideology. We move from the longhouse of the farmer to the great mead hall of the chief. This is not the reality of daily life, but the performance of power, and the dream of an afterlife built not of struggle, but of endless, glorious feasting. Imagine yourself now, stepping out of the cold, dark night and into the great hall of a powerful The difference is overwhelming. Where the farmer's longhouse was dim and smoky, this hall is a cavern of light and warmth. The long fires in the central hearth roar brightly, their flames reflecting off the polished surfaces of shields that hang on the walls. Torches fixed to the timber pillars add to the golden, flickering glow. The air is thick with a new collection of scents. The sharp, savory aroma of whole pigs and joints of beef roasting on spits over the fire. The sweet, heavy scent of honey mead, served in great drinking horns that are passed from hand to hand. The yeasty smell of strong ale, and the faint, exotic perfume of imported wine. A true luxury. This is the antithesis of the farmer's world of scarcity. This is a calculated display of abundance, of wealth so great it can be consumed in a single night of revelry. The benches that line the walls are crowded with the chieftain's herd, his personal retinue of warriors. They are large, confident men, their faces flushed from the heat and the drink. They wear tunics of brightly dyed wool reds, blues, and greens. Their arms are adorned with rings and bracelets of silver and gold. The sound is a joyous roar, laughter, deep and loud. The booming voices of men boasting of their exploits, their journeys, their courage in battle. But listen closer, and you will hear another sound cutting through the din. It is the sound of a harp, or a Norse lyre, its notes clear and resonant, and with it, a single, powerful voice. This is the Skald, the court poet, and in this hall, he is as important as any warrior. In a world with few written records, a man's reputation was his most valuable possession, and the Skald was its keeper. He was a master of words, a weaver of memory. His poems, chanted from memory, told the stories of great battles, heroic ancestors, and the magnificent generosity of his language is dense and metaphorical. He does not simply say, "the sea." He calls it, "the wind." A battle is not just a fight. It is a storm of swords. Blood is battle. A warrior is a feeder of ravens. And the man who pays the poet and rewards his warriors, is a ring giver. This poetic language, these kennings, served a vital purpose. They elevated the brutal, often squalid, reality of life and death into something mythic, something noble. The feast itself is a piece of political theater. It is here that the chieftain, the ring giver, demonstrates his power. By providing this extravagant food, this endless drink, he indebts his warriors to him. He cements their loyalty. He hands out gifts: a silver ring, a fine sword, a gold bracelet, and in return, he receives their oaths of fealty. Alliances are forged, and rivalries are settled in the warm glow of the fire. The Great Hall is the heart of the Viking elite, the stage upon which their world was ordered. But this bright, warm, noisy hall is an island. It is a constructed fantasy, held against the vast, dark reality outside its wooden walls. The warrior, boasting of the glorious storm of swords, is one of the lucky few who survived. He does not speak of the friends he watched fall, or the months of pain from a poorly healed wound. The rich meat roasting on the fire is a product of the endless, back-breaking toil of the farmers we met earlier, whose lives of quiet desperation are never the subject of the skald's grand poems. The very existence of this whole, this fantasy of noble life, is predicated on the hardship of the many. This desire for a perfected, idealized existence extends beyond life itself. It reaches into the very conception of the afterlife. For the elite warrior, the ultimate hope was not just for a pleasant eternity, but for an invitation to the grandest meat hall of all, Valhalla, the Hall of the Slain. This is the ultimate fantasy of the Viking warrior nobility. The sagas and poems paint a vivid picture of this place. It is the personal hall of the god Odin the Elf. It is so vast that 540 doors lined its walls, each one wide enough for 800 warriors to march through. To be chosen for Valhalla was the highest honor. The Valkyries, the supernatural warrior maidens, would sweep over the battlefields of the human world and choose the bravest of the slain to become one of the Einherjar, Odin's chosen champions. Imagine their afterlife. It is a perfection of the meat hall ideal. Every morning, the Einherjar wake, don their armor, and march out into the great courtyard of Asgard. There, they spend the day fighting. It is a joyous, glorious battle, a pure expression of their warrior spirit. They wound each other. They strike each other down in a magnificent display of skill. But at the end of the day, a miracle occurs. All wounds are healed. The dead rise, whole and unharmed. Then, they all return to the great hall for the eternal feast. The cook of the gods slaughters a great boar, named S, and roasts it in a cauldron. The warriors feast upon its flesh, and by the next morning, the boar is whole again, ready to be cooked anew. An endless supply of food. They drink mead, a magical, intoxicating brew that flows like a river from the udder of a goat, named Hay, who lives on the roof of Valhalla, nibbling the leaves of the great world tree. It is a fantasy of consumption without consequence, of combat without lasting death. It is the dream of a life, stripped of all the things that made the real world so difficult: hunger, sickness, permanent injury, and the finality of the grave. But this paradise has a grim purpose. The Einherjar are not simply on vacation. They are Odin's army. They are being trained and gathered for Ragnarok, the final, apocalyptic battle at the end of time, where they will fight and die alongside the gods against the giants and monsters. Even the most perfect fantasy of the Vikings is tinged with a deep, fatalistic understanding that all things, even the gods themselves, must come to an end. This vision of the afterlife, so specific and detailed, was not for everyone. It was not for the farmer who died of old age in his smoky longhouse. It was not for the fisherman lost in a storm at sea. It was not for the women of the Oseberg burial, who likely journeyed to a different, less martial afterlife. It was a specific fantasy for a specific class of people, designed to give meaning to their violent profession and to rob death in battle of its terror. So we are left with these four pictures. The farmer, locked in a cyclical struggle with the earth. The explorer, pushing the boundaries of the known world, driven by that same need for land and resources. The buried queen, her silent, magnificent tomb, a bridge between the world of the living and the mysteries of the dead. And the feasting warrior, living out an earthly fantasy and dreaming of an eternal one in None of these pictures alone is the Viking Age. The truth lies in the space between them, in the tension between the harsh reality of subsistence and the glorious dream of heroism. The Vikings, as we imagine them, are a product of selective memory, of the stories the skalds chose to tell and the sagas the Icelanders chose to write down centuries later. They preferred to remember the gleaming sword, not the wooden plow. They celebrated the whale road, not the muddy field. But behind every feasting chieftain was 100 farmers. Behind every successful voyage was the risk of a watery grave. And behind the dream of Valhalla was the universal, human fear of death and the desire to be remembered. The true story of the Vikings is not just a story of warriors. It is a story of farmers, sailors, women, artists, and poets. A story of quiet endurance, as much as loud. A story of a people struggling, surviving, and dreaming in a cold and unforgiving world. And now, our journey is at its end. The sounds of the meat hall have faded. The creaking of the ship has fallen silent. The cold air of the farm has warmed into the comfort of your own bed. The world of the Vikings feels at once immensely distant and strangely familiar. Their struggle for survival, their search for a better life, their love for their children, their fear of the unknown, and their need for stories to make sense of it all. These are the timeless threads of the human experience. They lived their lives under a sky of myth and a ground of harsh reality. They faced the darkness of the long winter with the light of a small fire. They faced a terrifying emptiness of the ocean with ships built of wood and courage. And they faced the finality of death with stories of magnificent journeys to come. Their world has vanished. The great halls are gone. The ships have rotted away or rest now in silent museums, but they left echoes. In the names of our days, in the landscapes they settled, and in the indomitable spirit of seeking what lies over the horizon. So, now, let these stories go. Let the images of fjords and longships and buried treasures drift away. There is nothing more to analyze, nothing more to learn tonight. There is only the peace of the present moment, the comfort of your own bed, the steady, quiet rhythm of your own breathing. Allow the silence to deepen. Allow your mind to be still. The past is a vast and quiet ocean. Let yourself drift upon it and float gently, peacefully, into a deep and restful sleep.